After becoming pregnant, I went up the mountain to pray for our unborn child. But unexpectedly, I saw my husband's wish card that he wrote for his ex-girlfriend half a month ago. Marissa, happy birthday. Wish you peace and joy throughout your life. Marissa. It's Marissa again. Ding. Wisnovel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. After returning home, I hysterically smashed the wish card on Adolf Spain. His face darkened. It's just a blessing. Do you have to make such a big fuss about it? Making a big fuss. I laughed dazedly, tears streaming down my face. He forgot that the day he prayed for Marissa Ladner was our 3rd wedding anniversary. He only remembered that it was Marissa's birthday that day. I think my crying and laughing must have looked ugly. But I couldn't control myself. He doesn't remember our wedding anniversary, but he clearly remembers Marissa's birthday. I got angry and pounced on him, scratching his face with my nails, wishing I could draw blood. Adolf was finally provoked by me. He firmly held my hands and dragged me in front of the full-length mirror. With one hand gripping my chin, he forced me to look at myself in the mirror and sarcastically said to me, "Nina Gregg, look at what you've become, like a shrew." With red eyes, I looked at him in sorrow and anger in the mirror. "Do you regret marrying me?" Adolf fell silent. His silence was the best answer. In that instant, it felt like all the strength in my body had been drained away. I said blankly, "Adolf Spain, we've known each other for 18 years. From the age of 8 to 26, a full 18 years. But Adolf no longer paid attention to me. After letting go of me, he picked up his coat and left. I didn't have a chance to tell him that I was pregnant. Actually, there was no need to tell him anymore. One night, a week later, I received a call from my best friend. She was excited. "Oh my God, Marissa returned to the country the day before yesterday. Did you know? I just saw her with Adolf, that scumbag, at the bar." Marissa was about to throw herself into Adolf's arms. So impatient? Just after we had a falling out, he's ready to reconcile with his old lover? I couldn't swallow this anger. Since he had made up his mind to make me unhappy, then nobody should be happy. I asked my best friend for the address of the bar. When I arrived, Adolf was half hugging and half dragging Marissa out of the bar. When I stood in front of them, Adolf was stunned for a moment. Marissa glanced at me and deliberately held Adolf's waist tighter. I could hardly suppress the anger rising in my heart. "We are not divorced yet." Adolf frowned. "I will explain it to you later. Marissa is allergic to alcohol, and I have to take her to the hospital now." I refused to agree. "Let the driver take her there, and you are not allowed to go." Adolf looked troubled. Marissa cried out in a coquettish manner. "Adolf, I feel so uncomfortable. Am I dying?" She really knows how to act. I sarcastically said, "I think you're a long way from dying." Marissa's eyes turned red, and tears immediately fell. Adolf gave me a cold gaze. "Nina Gregg, Marissa is not feeling well, and I just want to take her to the hospital. Can't you be more sensible and magnanimous?" I could hardly believe my ears. Did he just ask me to be magnanimous? Adolf brushed me aside and put Marissa in the back seat, then got in himself. He didn't even look at me again. I stood there in a daze for a long time. I am unreconciled. I'm not reconciled at all. So I hailed a taxi and followed them to the hospital. When I finally found Marissa's ward, she was receiving an intravenous drip. She sounded proud. Adolf went to buy fruits for me. My fist hanging by my side involuntarily clenched. "It's rare to see such a shameless woman like you." Marissa glared at me angrily. Am I shameless? By that time, Adolf was already with me. If you didn't threaten him with depression or suicide, how could he have married you? Yes, if I hadn't taken a trip to the gates of hell, maybe Adolf wouldn't have married me at all. My heart ached like being stabbed by a needle, making it difficult for me to breathe. I pretended to be calm. So what? As long as I don't divorce, you will always be a mistress that everyone scorns. Marissa was infuriated by my words. She grabbed a vase from the cabinet and threw it at me. But I quickly dodged it. The vase fell to the ground with a loud crash, and shattered glass covered the floor. Marissa glared at me with anger. "Nina Gregg, your father abandoned you, your mother abandoned you, and Adolf will abandon you too. I curse you to live a lonely and solitary life forever." When she mentioned my mother, I couldn't suppress the anger in my chest any longer. I took a big step forward and slapped her. One slap wasn't enough to vent my anger, so I slapped her again. She didn't act as arrogant as before. Instead, she covered her face and shrank back. "Nina, I never wanted to compete with you. How could you hit me?" A chill suddenly ran down my spine, and I had a bad feeling. Sure enough, the next second, a strong force grabbed my arm. I looked up and saw Adolf, his eyes full of anger. "Nina, I've already told you, there's nothing between Marissa and me. When will you stop causing trouble? I'm really tired of you." As he spoke, he used force and forcefully pushed me away. I staggered back a few steps, and my stomach hit the corner of a cabinet, causing a sharp, stabbing pain. When fresh red blood seeped between my legs, I suddenly felt a sense of relief. I weakly supported myself on the cabinet, turned around, and looked at Adolf. He was still standing in place with a look of astonishment and confusion. I weakly pulled the corners of my lips. "Adolf Spain, your child is gone. Congratulations, you can finally get rid of me." When I was 18, I started dating Adolf Spain. At first, we had a great relationship and were praised as the model couple. When I turned 20, something happened in my family. My dad secretly kept a mistress, who brought her 3-year-old son and caused a scene at home, demanding that my mom step aside. My mom had always been in poor health, and that day she was mentally absent-minded and fell from the upstairs, hitting the back of her head on the ground and never woke up again. Since then, I became insecure in my relationships. Whenever there was a girl within a few meters of Adolf, I would become extremely suspicious and on high alert. At that time, Adolf's feelings for me were still deep enough. No matter what I did or how I acted out, he silently endured it. After I vented, he would hold me and patiently comfort me. "Nina, don't be afraid. I will never change my feelings for you. We will be happy together forever." He promised he would never leave me. And I truly believed him. But who can tolerate someone else without any complaints for a lifetime? Later on, I often couldn't reach him, the messages I sent no longer received instant replies, and the calls I made often went unanswered. One day, while in the passenger seat of his Porsche, I found a wine-red curly hair belonging to a woman. I clearly remembered that he had said that the passenger seat was reserved exclusively for me and would never be touched by another woman. So, I went crazy and hysterically interrogated him, asking if he was cheating on me. Adolf had long forgotten his promise. "Nina, can you please stop being unreasonable? You're always like this, I'm really tired. After finishing work every day, I have to find ways to deal with you, it's really exhausting." Dealing with me. After 5 years of love, all that was left in the end was dealing with me. I was extremely sad, but I still held back my tears. "Fine, then let's break up." Adolf silently looked at me for a while, his voice dryly said, "Okay." Then, he stepped on the gas pedal and drove away. Usually, when I threw a tantrum, he would come and coax me within 3 days. But this time, I waited for a whole month and he never came. I endured it, but in the end, I couldn't resist going to find him. After entering the password, when the door opened, what I saw was Adolf was sitting on the sofa, with Marissa straddling his lap, and her hands wrapped around his neck, their lips entangled. Her wine-red curly hair hung behind her, the length and color exactly the same as the curly hair I found in the passenger seat. I was momentarily stunned, then leaned against the door and vomited. Adolf calmly grabbed a nearby blanket and draped it over Marissa. After adjusting his clothes, he stood up and walked towards me. My eyes were bloodshot as I glared at him with hatred. I raised my hand, wanting to slap him, but he caught my wrist. He said in a deep voice, "Nina, we have already broken up." My voice trembled. "But we only broke up half a month ago." "No, that's not right. Not half a month. He actually wanted to break up with me a long time ago. The one who used to be so intimate with me, the one who would hold me affectionately and say he would love me forever, the one who promised never to leave me, the one who would happily say that we would have children together in the future, that Adolf Spain, didn't want me anymore. But I didn't want to admit it. My mom died, my dad didn't want me, and Adolf was also going to abandon me. From now on, I would be all alone, with no one to rely on, and no home to return to. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I started crying, but then I started laughing again. I'm really ridiculous. How could I be so naive, so foolish? I actually believed him. How could I be so stupid as to believe in a love that lasts forever? After that, I developed depression. Every day, I constantly doubted and denied myself. I felt that my existence was worthless. Finally, one day, I used a fruit knife to cut my wrist. Unfortunately, I didn't die. I was saved by Adolf. 3 years later, looking back, maybe it would be good for me to die at that time. That way, I wouldn't have been hurt again, and I wouldn't have lost the baby in my body. I just wanted to have a home of my own. Why is it so difficult? Baby, I'm sorry, Mom couldn't protect you. Please don't blame Mom, okay? I looked at Adolf, whose face was pale, and choked out. Adolf Spain, I let you go, I want a divorce. From now on, we're completely done, no more feelings or obligations. We've known each other for 18 years, dated for 5 years, and been married for 3 years. All those happy and sad memories, I don't want them anymore. I'm giving you back your freedom. I'm letting you go, and I'm letting go of myself too. Adolf moved his lips, but no sound came out. He just stood there, as if he had been greatly shocked. It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter what he thinks anymore. It's time for everything to end. Let it end like this. My lower abdomen was in severe pain, and I struggled to support myself against the wall, trying to walk out. Just as I took 2 steps, my head started spinning, and my body uncontrollably fell to the side. I fainted. When I woke up, I found myself lying in a hospital bed with an 4 tube inserted into the back of my left hand. Adolf was sitting on a chair next to the bed, hunched over with his face buried in his hands. Because I had almost no strength in my body, my voice was as weak as a mosquito. Why aren't you with Marissa? What are you doing here? Upon hearing my voice, his body shook abruptly, and then he slowly put down his hands. Without any disguise, I noticed that his eyes were red, as if he had been crying. Why? Was it because I said I would let him go, and he was overwhelmed with joy? I looked at him expressionlessly. He looked dejected, and his voice trembled slightly. Why didn't you tell me that you were pregnant? I had intended to come back and tell him after making a wish. But I gave up when I saw that wishing card. What difference would it make if I told him? Would he completely forget about Marissa? Or would he still love me as before? Nothing would change. He was no longer the Adolf who was once completely devoted to me. I didn't want to cry, but tears kept falling uncontrollably, flowing from the corners of my eyes to my temples, gradually soaking the pillow. He reached out his hand, wanting to wipe away my tears. I turned my head and avoided him. His distinct bony fingers froze in midair, and after a while, he weakly put them down. His voice was extremely dry. Nina, you're still young, we will have children in the future. We? In the future? What a big joke. Where did we come from? Where did the future come from? Adolf, we have long lost each other in the torrent of fate. I turned my head and looked at him, saying coldly, Mr. Spain, your beloved is waiting for you in the next ward. Just now, you pushed me down and killed your own child for her sake. And now you're pretending to be a good person. Don't you feel hypocritical and disgusting? An indescribable pain suddenly appeared in his eyes. His lips turned pale, almost devoid of any trace of blood. He regretfully said, Nina, I was just angry at that time. I didn't expect it would harm you. It's not what you think between me and Marissa. I'm just worried about her. She has severe allergies, and I'm just afraid something might happen to her. You know, it was my fault towards her in the first place. I owe her. Oh, her? I laughed at myself. Are you blaming me for getting depression, for forcing you to leave her and come back to save me? 3 years ago, Adolf sat in front of my sickbed just like this, confessing to me. "I'm sorry, Nina, I was wrong. Please don't leave me, please live well." I felt exhausted and tearfully told him that I didn't want to see him anymore. But he stubbornly refused to leave, holding me tightly and chokingly saying that his feelings for Marissa were not love. He said he was just too tired, too suppressed. My unreasonable tantrums and groundless suspicions suffocated him. He desperately needed an outlet to vent. And Marissa became that outlet. She lived boldly, laughed freely. She brought him freedom, relaxation, and happiness. He thought that if he spent enough time apart from me, he could forget about me. But it wasn't until I was on the brink of death that he realized Nina had long been integrated into his bones and had become a part of his body. He couldn't imagine how dark the world would be without me. He begged me over and over again to forgive him, to live on. I went crazy, lifted my uninjured hand, and slapped his face. Once. Twice. Thrice. That day, I slapped him 50 times in total. He never dodged once. In the end, my hand went numb and lost its sensation. His face was swollen and covered in glaring bloodstains. It must have been painful, but he still managed to smile. "Feeling better now? If you're not, keep hitting me until you're satisfied." He took my hand and pressed it against his face. I remember when we were studying, after getting beaten by my dad, you would gently stroke my face and say, "Adolf, let Nina rub it, it won't hurt anymore after rubbing." And I would always laugh and reply, "Nina, you're so cute but silly. Rubbing will only make it hurt more when my face is already red." As he spoke, tears continued to stream down his face. He cried while reminiscing about the sweet moments we had shared. And so, I softened. I was the one who was wrong. I shouldn't have softened. I shouldn't have forgiven him. And I definitely shouldn't have thought that Marissa would disappear from our lives because of this. In the 3 years of our marriage, every time we had an unpleasant quarrel, every time he felt suppressed, he must have thought of Marissa, right? She was like a thorn, always standing between me and Adolf. I'm tired of this entanglement. Since Adolf feels indebted to Marissa, since Marissa wants to take my place as Mrs. Spain, then I'll step back and fulfill their wishes. But I never expected that when I wanted to let go of Adolf, he would be unwilling.